In the past month, I've been living the stereotypical German car life, and that is to say I've been bleeding money. I spent about $2,000 replacing the clutch on my Porsche 911, only to have the next week the battery die and have to replace that. Then I purchased this 335i, great idea, and had the oil filter housing gasket leaking right off the bat. So I spent several hours fixing that. So it seems like a good a time as any to review one of my German cars. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive. And while I have had my trials and tribulations with my German cars recently, that doesn't mean that I do not love them. There are still plenty to love about my 911 and certainly plenty to love about my 335i. And that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about today, along with the things that I don't love. So just to recap, I've had this car for about a month. So I've driven it every single day. I have a little more perspective than most journalists that would have it for a day or two. And I've uncovered some things that I like and I don't like about it. So I wanted to share that with you guys today. It's a 2012 F30 generation 335i, and it is the Sport line, not to be confused with the M Sport that they didn't have in 2012, which are essentially the same thing. The M Sport just gets you more cosmetics. The Sport line comes with all the basics that you get in an M Sport, like the upgraded M Sport suspension, upgraded wheels, and most importantly, the sport seats, which are absolutely imperative for these cars. But anyway, let's go for a drive and let's start with what I love about my 335i. Ooh-wee. God, she gets up and goes. That's a big number, and this thing just pulls like a friggin' freight train. Gosh, this engine and transmission combo is such a beautiful thing, and it is the absolute best part about this car. Now, this is a ZF 8-speed transmission, and whatever, you know, you guys are gonna say, look, oh, it's not a manual, it sucks. Whatever. Manuals have their place in the world, automatics have their place in the world. I love manuals, I love automatics. They're just different flavors. Now let's talk about the transmission itself and why it's so good. BMW was one of the early adopters of the ZF 8-speed transmission. It's kind of all over the place now, and I can see why. It makes me question why you need a dual clutch. And there's two facets to that. Obviously, a dual clutch is awesome because it shifts super fast. But in my opinion, a dual clutch, most of them at least, suck at low speed. There's like weird jerky motions going on at low speed, and they're just not fluid like a traditional automatic. That's where the ZF 8-speed comes in. It is my biggest surprise because not only does it shift fast, but it also has like really good manners at low speeds when you're just in a parking lot or in traffic. It's not doing these like weird jerky motions that a lot of dual clutch transmissions do. Now, not only is it good at low speed, it shifts super fast, and it has 8 gears. So that means that you get good fuel economy and it cruises super chill. There's always a right gear for what you want to do, and it just kind of always seems to do what you want. So to me, it was the biggest surprise with this car. Like, I knew that the ZF 8-speed was good. I didn't realize it was this good. Now, how can you talk about a 335i without talking about this engine? N55 engine. Jesus. That is the most underrated 300 horsepower I have ever experienced. Like, when they say it makes 300 horsepower, this thing makes 300 horsepower to the wheels. This is an incredible engine, and this car is stock. I can't imagine when I add a tune to this car what it's gonna feel like. So, super underrated. When you look at stats for other cars and compare it to other cars in the segment, and you know, S4 330 horsepower, IS350s or Lexuses that rate over 300 horsepower, I'm telling you, this car is quicker, especially with this transmission. Like, this car is super fast. So the N55 engine is really the second generation of this engine itself. The first one being the N54, which was a fantastic engine, twin turbo, but had a lot of reliability problems. And I think that's when BMW kind of went back and said, all right, how can we make this engine a little more reliable and still have make really good power. And they've done that with the N55. You know, they went from twin turbo to a single twin scroll turbo. That's where they get the twin power nomenclature from, which is a little bit misleading, but this engine is incredible. It has power down low. It has power up top. It runs out of steam a little bit at the top end, but for the advantages that you get in the low to mid-range, it's well worth it. So, you know, I've really talked about the engine and transmission. The powertrain of this car are really the best part. And to that extent, kind of the third and best thing about this car, from a practicality and reasonable standpoint, is actually the fuel economy. I'm shocked to be saying this, but it's actually really good from a turbocharged, fast, like 0 to 60 in 4 point something seconds BMW that will get legitimately over 30 miles to the gallon. I owned a BMW E90 M3. Never saw above 20 miles to the gallon. Even on the highway, never saw above 20 miles to the gallon. This car, I get 28 miles to the gallon, beating the hell out of it, driving it around town, some on the highway, mixed driving, 28 miles to the gallon. Really? Like, I am absolutely shocked by that and impressed. And it's great because for me, this is a daily driver, and it doesn't hurt when you get good fuel economy and you still have the performance. Now, unfortunately, on to the complaints. Don't get me wrong, this is still a really good handling car and a really good sports sedan, but it's such a step back, in my opinion, steering-wise, from previous BMWs. The steering is still very precise. There's no play. You know, when you turn the wheel, something happens directly. There's no slop at all. That's one aspect of steering, right? And that's really important. But the other and equally important aspect is the feel that you get back through the wheel. And there just isn't much on this car. When the tires break away, I have no sense other than my ass that is happening and the noise that they make. I can't feel it through the wheels. And this car, when you push it hard, it does tend to understeer. You know, they built in some safety, which is not a surprise, unfortunately. But do I wish it was the other way around? Yes, I wish it was more neutral. I wish maybe had a hint of oversteer at the limit. But when you really push it, you gotta fight through a lot of understeer. And once again, that's just compounded when you don't have a lot of feel through the steering wheel. My other biggest complaint about the car is kind of related to steering, so this is a good segue, but it really boils down to all the different settings that this car has. So you can adjust the weight of the steering, the programming of the transmission, the sensitivity of the throttle and the throttle response. I mean, whatever happened to just one good setting? Like my E46 M3, you would just drive and it was perfect because you didn't have to adjust the dampers, you didn't have to adjust the steering. Like, it just had one setting and that was good. Why can't we do that? Why do we have to have so many settings now? This steering gets artificially heavy and obnoxiously heavy when you start putting it in the higher sport modes. It's unnecessary. The other problem that I have with all these settings, and at least in this car specifically, is I can't fine tune them to my needs. I can jump from comfort to sport like I will now, but watch what happens. All right, I just went to sport, but now, even though I'm cruising at the same mile per hour, the tach just went up because it just changed up a gear. Now, if I want heavier steering, but I don't want to lose fuel economy for absolutely no reason because I'm going the same speed, I can't do anything about it. I can't customize this. Now, I think in some of the later cars, they did make this a menu option in the iDrive, but I'm telling you right now, I cannot fine-tune my sport mode. I just get sport, which is heavy steering, go up a couple gears in the transmission, and sharpen the throttle response. I mean, it's nice to an extent, but I can't customize it how I want it. So I think personally that all these different options are a detriment to these cars, and manufacturers just need to go back to making one good all-around package. Just make a good car. E40, just model it after the E46 M3 because that was perfect.
But the biggest problem, by a long shot, is this. The auto start stop, which is fine in the fact that I can defeat it by hitting that button. Okay, so that turns off the auto start stop for the time being. However, if I were to turn off the car and turn it back on, that feature resets. It does not persist through a key cycle. So if I stop this car, put it in park, turn it off, I'm chilling here, car's off, turn it back on, guess what? That feature is back on. So now, every single time I start the car, I have to turn the auto start stop feature off because it is the most annoying thing in the world. And this is the biggest problem with this car.
I've really focused on the biggest ticket items on this car so far, but it is worth noting that there are some really good honorable mentions. These seats are amazing, the headlights are amazing, ton of light, and these ones are adaptive, so they turn when I turn, which is really, really cool. Thought the ride is fantastic on bumpy roads, perfect for a daily driver, lacks a little bit of spring for sporty driving. For me, it's a small price to pay for the comfort of daily driving. So it does lack a little bit there. If you only are going to have one car and you are really concerned about a sporting nature, you should maybe look elsewhere or at least upgrade the suspension to something that's a little firmer. Well, guys, that's basically it. That's basically what I have for you about my 335i so far. I am really, really enjoying it. I'm glad I nipped that oil filter housing gasket leak so I don't have to worry about it in the future. I've heard horror stories of oil leaking onto the drive belts and causing all kinds of issues. So I'm glad I got that taken care of. I hope the car can be reliable for me. We will find out. My German cars haven't been very kind to me lately, so please 335, treat me well. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Appreciate you guys watching as always, and we will see you next time. Oh, turkey. Huh. What's up, turkey? I didn't know that the road just ended. How fast can you go backwards? Probably pretty fast, actually. Oh, this is weird. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, and